Shalom, good evening. This is TV7 Israel News broadcast to you from Jerusalem. And in today's top stories, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu asserts that the defeat of the Islamist Hamas would inflict a stinging blow to Iran's axis of terror. An Israeli interagency delegation will travel to Washington to alleviate U.S. concerns over the IDF's pending ground offensive into the town of Rafah. The U.S. Central Command launched repeated strikes against the Iranian proxy Ansar Allah in Yemen as the Houthis pledged to widen attacks against freedom of navigation. Israel must win the war against the Islamist Hamas terror organization for the sake of its future and that of the Middle East in particular and Western civilization at large.
We have to win this war. The survival of Israel, the future of Israel, in my opinion, the future of the Middle East and beyond depends on this victory. This victory is within reach.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed a visiting delegation of the powerful American Israel Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC, continued by defining the characterization of victory in the eyes of Jerusalem.
How do we define victory? We define it as the destruction of Hamas's military and governing capability. We define it also as the return of the hostages, which we're working right now. That's why it was a bit late, because we have to instruct our delegation that is going to Doha. And we define it also as preventing the return of Gaza from becoming a threat to Israel at any time in the future. This is important. There's also the Northern Front, where we want to return our people to a condition of security that requires that Hezbollah move back. We can get into that. That is also part of our goals, which we will not give up on.
The Israeli premier further asserted that victory versus the Islamist Hamas would essentially also constitute a stinging blow to the terror axis led by the Islamic Republic of Iran.
If we achieve these goals, then we will also deliver a stinging blow to the Iran terror axis, which is behind everything that we're seeing here today. That is something that we all have to understand, that this is not just Israel's battle. It is a battle for our future, but it's also the battle for the victory of the Israel-American moderate Arab axis against the Iran axis. And unless we have that victory that I talked about, then we have a defeat. And a defeat spells terrible things for our future and for the future of the Middle East and beyond the Middle East. Because this is a war of civilization against barbarism, those who want to bring back the Middle East to the Middle Ages, early Middle Ages, and those who want to see it go into the century of progress and advance in the 21st century. That's really the battle. It's a very, very big battle.
Premier Netanyahu also expressed, in contrast to robust disinformation spouted by totalitarian-owned media outlets, among others, throughout Western societies, Israel's unity in support for Jerusalem's war objectives vis-à-vis the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates in the Gaza Strip. Nevertheless, while Israeli society remains vastly resilient in the face of prolonged adversity, Western leaders who voiced persistent support for Israel's war objectives since the abhorrent Hamas onslaught of October 7th, broad misinformation regarding prospects for calamity in the event of an Israeli offensive into the Gazan border town of Rafah is seemingly disconcerting. One such example was evident during a visit in Jerusalem by German Chancellor Olaf Scholz earlier this week, who exhibited Germany's unapologetic support for Israel's right to self-defense since October 7th.
Israel's military operation in the Gaza Strip has now been going for about 5 months, and large parts of Hamas military infrastructure have been destroyed. During these 5 months, the cost in human lives and the number of civilian casualties has grown to be extremely high. Many would argue much too high. As a partner and as a friend of Israel, I have shared my concerns about the development of this war with the Prime Minister. By fighting Hamas terrorists, Israel is pursuing a legitimate goal: never again an October 7. The longer the war lasts, the higher the number of civilian casualties rises, the more desperate the situation of the people in Gaza become, the more this begs the question, no matter how important the goal, can it justify such terribly high costs? Or are there other ways to achieve your goal?
While Chancellor Scholz's voiced concern chiefly derives from humanitarian considerations, other Western leaders are seemingly contending with domestic political considerations, as Islamist migrants have seemingly managed to gain leverage over their respective host nations' foreign policies. Meanwhile, amid rising tensions between the Biden administration and Netanyahu government, U.S. President Joe Biden held a phone conversation with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to try and mitigate evident points of contention between the two allies.
שוחחתי הערב עם נשיא ארצות הברית ג'ו ביידן. דיברנו על ההתפתחויות האחרונות במלחמה, לרבות המחויבות של ישראל להשיג את כל מטרות המלחמה. חיסול החמאס, שחרור כל חטופינו, והבטחה שעזה לא תהווה יותר איום על ישראל. תוך כדי מתן הסיוע ההומניטרי ההכרחי שמסייע להשיג את המטרות הללו.
Addressing the phone conversation from the Biden administration, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan asserted, irrespective of any disagreements, that President Biden remains bone-deep committed to ensuring the long-term security of Israel.
Earlier today, President Biden spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu, as you all have heard. The two leaders discussed the latest developments in Israel and Gaza, and they spoke about the state of Israel's military operations. The president emphasized his bone-deep commitment to ensuring the long-term security of Israel, and he affirmed, as he did in the State of the Union, that Israel has a right to go after Hamas, the perpetrators of the worst massacre of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. The president told the Prime Minister again today that we share the goal of defeating Hamas, but we just believe you need a coherent and sustainable strategy to make that happen.
Sullivan went on to elaborate on Biden's conversation with Netanyahu, particularly on Washington's objection to Jerusalem's decision to launch an offensive into the Gaza border town of Rafah.
The President and the Prime Minister spoke at length about Rafah today. The President explained why he is so deeply concerned about the prospect of Israel conducting major military operations in Rafah of the kind it conducted in Gaza City and Khan Yunis. First, more than 1 million people have taken refuge in Rafah. They went from Gaza City to Khan Yunis and then to Rafah. And they have nowhere else to go. Gaza's other major cities have largely been destroyed. And Israel has not presented us or the world with a plan for how or where they would safely move those civilians, let alone feed and house them and ensure access to basic things like sanitation. But a major ground operation there would be a mistake. It would lead to more innocent civilian deaths, worsen the already dire humanitarian crisis, deepen the anarchy in Gaza, and further isolate Israel internationally.
It is important to stress that without a military offensive in Rafah, the Islamist Hamas will undoubtedly pull through and most likely regain control of the Gaza Strip in the long run. Therefore, as Jerusalem remains unrelenting in its objective to eradicate the Islamist Hamas, irrespective of the Biden administration's objections, Netanyahu accommodated Biden's request to hold working-level meetings to try and alleviate Washington's concerns. Turning to the Red Sea, where the United States, Britain, and other Western navies are working tirelessly to contend with the repeated attacks against maritime shipping by the Iranian proxy Ansar Allah, which is dominated by the Houthi tribe in Yemen. Only yesterday, the U.S. Central Command announced the destruction of 7 anti-ship missiles, 3 unmanned aerial vehicles, and 3 weapons storage containers in the Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen, after CENTCOM determined that these weapons presented an immediate threat to merchant vessels and U.S. Navy ships in the region. It is important to explain that recently, in spite of Western countermeasures against the Iranian proxy in Yemen, the leader of the Houthi tribe pledged to further broaden attacks against Western shipping.
معركتنا الأساسية في هذا هي منع السفن المرتبطة بالعدو الإسرائيلي ليس فقط من المرور عبر البحر العربي والبحر الأحمر وخليج عدن، إنما نتجه بتوفيق الله تبارك وتعالى وبمعونته سبحانه إلى منع عبورها حتى عبر المحيط الهندي ومن جنوب أفريقيا باتجاه طريق الرجاء الصالح. هذه الخطوة المهمة والمتقدمة والكبيرة بدأنا ننفذ عملياتنا المرتبطة بها.
While the Iranian proxy leader declared the broadening of attacks against freedom of navigation, his masters in Tehran are seemingly expanding their own naval alliance with Moscow and Beijing, the latest of which was displayed in the naval exercise dubbed Security Bond 2024 in the Gulf of Oman.
此次海上联合演习，中伊俄三方围绕反海盗、搜救等内容，主要演练了对海射击、武力营救被劫持商船等科目，三方轮流指挥，密切协同，演练进一步促进了三方的交流合作。
Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News. It is important to highlight that TV7 Israel is a donation-based non-profit ministry with all of our productions available free of charge. Therefore, we would appreciate it if you would consider making a donation. You can do so by visiting our website at www.tv7israelnews.com. Separately, I'd like to encourage you, pray for the peace of Jerusalem and salvation of Israel. I'm Jonathan Hessen wishing you a Shavua Mevorach, and God willing, we'll see you during our upcoming TV7 Israel updates. Until then, Shalom from Jerusalem.